Yeah, so these are some of the topics which we already covered. We saw some basics of software engineering, we saw basics of testing, then we saw the principles of testing, why we actually need to go ahead with the software testing. And then we looked into some of the software development life cycle. That was just a brush up of some of the concepts which you've already studied uh, in your previous classes. But just to bring a connect, we thought of adding that particular topic as well. And in today's class, we are going to talk about software quality. Now, before that, I have a question. I gave you a task about going through a particular paper. What paper was that? Which paper was that? Any idea? So once again, I am sharing the name of that particular thing. It is a comedy of errors, the London Ambulance Service case study. So basically, this paper gives you an overview of the exact incident that happened, and that also talks about the importance of software testing. Basically, this paper was presented in one of the workshop on software specification and design, and it's like, as I said, it's like phenomenal paper cited so many times. This discussion basically made people focus on quality, specifically software quality. Right now, we are talking about, because, anyways, if suppose we are going for software testing, then also at the end, our ultimate aim is to come up with a quality software or quality application. Now, so when we say quality, what it means is that this is something which is like meeting the requirements consistently and predictably. And there are two things. One is like design quality, or you can say it is a great quality, which tells you that you have like more features for more money. And another thing is like a product meeting the demand, right? So if suppose I have asked for a product with, let's say, 5 requirements, and all the 5 requirements are met by the product, in that sense, uh, in that particular case, we claim it to be a quality product. On the other hand, let's take one example, right? As we have already discussed, that we cannot compare an apple with a banana, right? Both the things are different, though falling under a category of fruits, but yet both the things are different with different characteristics, different pricing. So similarly, in case of software product, if suppose I have a product for, let's say, $1,000, another product is for, let's say, $10,000, so I cannot compare those products in terms of quality conformance. Now, when we talk about software quality, so it basically emphasizes on some of these points, which is like your software requirements foundation from which you can measure the software quality. Right. So first of all, when we talk about software quality, it's like we say that, okay, this is something which is, you can say, the very first stage, we go for requirements elicitation, requirements gathering. In that case, your software requirements comes into picture, and for any particular thing, whether it is product development, or it is, let's say, you can say, uh, overall quality measurements or coming up with the product. It's the software quality, software requirements which are laying the foundation. So in case of quality, also what we do is we provide with one-to-one mapping, right? Which means that if suppose a product in the software requirement specification, 5 points are asked. So we expect that okay, all the 5 points are provided. All those 5 points are provided by the product. Product means the end result which we have received. So in that case, your software requirements becomes very crucial because we go for one-to-one mapping of the. Let's say the client has asked for XYZ properties, and all those properties are already there in the product. So in that case, we'll declare that okay, this is something which is a quality product. Now, in some cases, we say that okay, the specified standards to be met, right? There should be some standards which should be like understood that these are the quality standards. It can be your ISO guidelines, and those standards should be met by the products. In addition to that, what we have is that the product should have some implicit requirements, right? The product should have like some requirements which are understood, like usability should be high, so that's something which is understood. It should be portable, right? It should be available. So all these things are some things which are like well understood, and it should be like it's accepted, and it should be readily available with the products only. Now, then we can have several classifications of software quality, and one of the classification is this, which is your functional quality or the structural quality. So basically, in case of functional quality, we are directly referring to the functional requirements or your functional specific. If we talk about your functional requirements or functional attributes and non-functional requirements or NFAs, which are your non-functional attributes in the coming slides. So in case of a structural, I am basically talking about the product meeting the non-functional requirements. So all those accessibilities, availability, portability, modifiability, correctness, security, adaptability. So specifically, all those accessibilities will fall under the non-functional requirements. So the coming slides are basically, I took a reference from your Ian Somerville book, which is. So this is another way of dealing with software quality attributes. One is your static quality attribute. From the term itself, you might have got the idea that okay, it has something to do with the actual code. It has something to do with your related documents. And some of the examples include whether your code is structured or not, whether your code is maintainable or not, whether it is a testable code, with what ease I can test the code, and my documentation. Because as we studied in the initial part of this course, that your software engineering is something which is like a product plus documentation. In that sense, the documentation part is correct and complete. It's like the thorough documentation is there for any FAQs. Sorry, for any help. There is something which is there will be some topic which will be addressing that particular problem which the user is facing at the moment. Another thing is your dynamic quality attribute. So here we deal with the behavior of the application, and that too how it behaves when the product is in use. So basically, in some sense, we are dealing with your non-functional requirements or non-functional attributes. So I am dealing with reliability, correctness, completeness, consistency, usability, and of course performance as well. So this is a software quality triangle. So in the literature, you will find some variations of it as well. So what it is saying is that we have like three components. One is your maintenance, another one is your modification, and the last one is your operation. So when we are talking about your maintenance part, some of the questions which arise from it is like, can I fix a particular issue, right? So I am talking about fixability. So basically, we are dealing with the scope, we are dealing with time, we are dealing with cost as well. And can I change a particular portion of it? So basically, we are talking about flexibility in some sense. And after fixing and or changing, can I test it, right? Because if I'm going for a maintenance, right, in order to ensure that whatever changes I have made have not brought in any major adverse impact on the overall working of the application, so for that sake, I need to go for testing. So after all those maintenance work done, can I test this particular thing? Now, this was about maintenance, and when we talk about modifications, so basically we are dealing with your portability, reusability, adaptability, and extensibility. Right. So, in terms of portability, what we address is that what answer we try to find for this particular question. Question is like, can I use on other computers and the platforms? So, the product which I am receiving can be used on some other platforms as well? And can I use a part of it for some other purposes? Right. So a part of a product, whether it can be reused for the same product or for a different product, then can it work together with other systems as well? If suppose I have, let's say, I have an admission management system, and whether it is able to adapt the changes with which a payment gateway is bringing to itself, right? So in that case, whether my system will be working together in sync with other external systems or internal systems as well, right? Even external can be your third party, right? Including an API, right? That is something which is like we are dealing with adaptability, and we are trying to answer this particular question. Then can I extend it if required, right? If I need to add some extra functionalities, then whether I can add that particular part as well. When we deal with operation part, so the point is that is it correct? So here, what in case of operations we are dealing with correctness, we are dealing with dependability, we are dealing with security, efficiency, and usability, and accessibility, and then the user friendliness. So in case of correctness, does it do what I want? Right. So all the things, all the operations are performed correctly or not? And sometimes we are like fully dependent on it, right? See, the purpose of introducing these applications is to have a flawless task, right? So whether it is dependable or not, so does it work correct every time? So I need to look for the answer for this particular question as well. And whatever data I have uploaded or generated, whether that data is secured effectively or not, right? So that particular question is also asked. And does it use my equipment efficiently? All the hardware resources, network resources are utilized properly or not? That's also the question for which I need to look for the answer. And does it solve my task, right? How usable this particular application is? And can I access it whenever and from wherever I want, right? So ease of access and accessibility factor is at what degree, then whether I'm comfortable with using this particular product or not. So here I'm dealing with usability part of it. So I'm looking for the user friendliness. Once again, that's something which is subjective in nature. Now, so this point I added from Barry Boehm's research work. So Barry Boehm has contributed to software engineering a lot. You will see many times I'm citing and using this particular name. So what it says is that attention to characteristics of software quality can lead to significant savings in software lifecycle cost. So basically, what Barry is trying to say that if I'm giving a lot amount of focus on software quality, then definitely I'm able to reduce lot amount of cost in the entire software lifecycle. Right. That means the overall cost incurred in the entire software lifecycle. Now, this is the next topic is dealing with defect management. So, what we see is that this is something which is dealing with defects. So, here, what are options we have? We have like defect prevention, we have defect discovery, we have recording and reporting, and we have your resolution. That means I'm trying to find some solution for this particular thing, and then ultimately we have like prediction as well. Right. So in this, all these phases, like these are the defect management strategies. So we have like 5 phases. So in this, what basically we are doing is that if suppose I have like uh, I have to prevent, right? I have to prevent the defects. So definitely, I'll go ahead with good coding techniques. I'll look for the unit test plans. I'll go for code inspections, and these are some of the important elements which can help in defect prevention. Because first of all, it's better to prevent it. And even if suppose after taking all the measures, I there might be a possibility that I'm not able to prevent it, so that means my product is having some defects. So I need to discover it. Right. So basically, defect discovery is dealing with identification of defects. And this identification of defects can be in response to the failures observed. And the most easiest part of discovering a defect involves your code debugging. That's the simplest part, right? Later on, in at another level, we can also look for testing a product in a different way. Then what we have is we have like defect resolution, or sorry, once we have discovered it, the next task is to document that particular defect, right? So what we do is we document it, that means we record it, and we communicate it to the team members. Or we can say that we can communicate with the stakeholders as well. So we have discovered it, now it's time to record it and report it. So we have communicated it as well. Now, after prevention, we went for discovery. If we are successful in discovering, we went for recording and reporting. And now it is time to resolve it. So basically, your defect resolution involves the security scrutiny of the defect. Right, I'll try to identify effects. I'll try to find some solution. Right. And if I'm able to identify effects, I'll implement it. And once again, post implementation, I'll test that particular fix, and at the end, I'll close the defect after resolving it. Right. So this defect management has a cycle. In case of resolution, let's scrutiny the defect. Let's identify effects, right? Because once I have read the defect properly, I'll identify a solution to that particular problem. Once I have identified it, I'll implement it. After implementation, I test that particular fix, and after testing, I'll close that particular defect as well. Obviously, after resolving it. And the last one is that I can also make some attempts to predict the defects. Based on my prior experience, I can also predict some of the defects. So I can go ahead with the source code analysis. That's the best way to predict the defect. So in that way, like how many defects an application might contain before entering into the testing phase. So it's like before the testing phase, I'm trying to predict those defects, and obviously by some minor steps taken at the developer's end, I'm trying to resolve it. I'm trying to resolve it because see, I'm able to predict it. I'll definitely try to prevent it, and if suppose I fail in prevention, I'll go for discovery, recording and reporting, and once again for resolution. So this is the overall defect management cycle. Now the next part is your requirements. Okay, any idea about software requirements? Any idea about software requirements? No? Some basic idea? No? Okay. By the way, in the meantime, I received an email from the placement cell. So that means someone from this class has informed. And yes, your information was correct. Somewhere around 30 people are there for the placements. So, okay, coming back to discussion, we have like software requirements. So, a condition or capability needed by a user to solve a problem or achieve an objective. Right. So basically, these statements I lifted from IEEE Software Engineering Glossary IEEE 83, and this is for for less constrained systems. And in case of highly constrained systems, we have like a condition or capability that must be met or possessed by a system or its component to satisfy a contract. It can be a standard, it can be a specification, or it can be some other formally imposed documents. The set of all requirements will be forming the basis of subsequent development of the system or the system components. Now, let's take this discussion further. So, what we have is I have another definition, and this is from F. Brooks, No Silver Bullet, Isn't and Accidents of Software Engineering. So, what it says is that the hardest single part of building a software system is deciding precisely what to build. No other part of the conceptual work is difficult as establishing the detailed technical requirements, including all the interfaces to people, to machines, and to other software systems. No part of the work so cripples the resulting system if done wrong. No other part is more difficult to rectify later. See, when my requirements are not correct, right, then that means my building basic blocks is is itself incorrect. Right? So that's why it says that there's something software requirements are something which are very crucial, which are very, very important. So this is something which is your software requirements definition process steps. So this what we have is we have requirements identification. That means I am trying to identify the requirements for the to be built application. And I also, in addition to this, I also need to identify the software development constraints. So both these, in some sense, you can say that step 1 and 2 are the parts of requirements gathering. And once I've gathered the requirements, I'll go for requirements analysis. Once I have analyzed these requirements, I have made a call on it, a final call on it. I'll go for representing those requirements with the help of obviously your textual or graphical format or maybe a combination of it. And then what we'll do is we'll communicate to all these stakeholders. We'll communicate these requirements to all these stakeholders. And the last one is like preparation for validation of software requirements. So there is another question, right? I definitely have identified something. I have identified the constraints. I have done the requirements analysis. I have represented it. I have communicated it. Now it's high time to validate it because that would be something which is like final step, post which the development starts. Development can be in the form of your design documents and other stuff, followed by your coding, testing, deployment. So it's better to validate these requirements which are specified, because in some of the cases what we can observe is that my client who has asked for the software which we are building, that particular client might not be technically sound. So in that case, there might be a possibility where we can say that whatever the things have been asked by the clients are not feasible at this particular budget, right? So I need to validate it. But budget is one of the constraints, and there can be another constraints as well. Technological constraints can also be there. So I'll definitely validate these. So these steps are nothing but the part of your software definition process steps. Now let's classify these software requirements. And this is something which is a broader classification. We'll also look into another categorization, you can say. So what we have is we have like functional requirements and we have like non-functional requirements. In case of functional requirements, what I am trying to do is I am trying to describe the functionality or the systems. Right, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to describe the functionality or the system services. And I'm also trying to what I'm trying to do is these requirements will be the statements of the services that my system should provide. In addition to this, see, these are functional requirements. So how the system should react to what kind of inputs we have. That means for what input the system should give what output. That means for correct set of inputs, it should give some output. For incorrect set of inputs, it should give some error messages. And then what we have is like how the system should behave in a particular situation. So that would also be a part of functional requirement. Next is your non-functional requirements. So basically, it defines and specifies the overall qualities or the attributes of a system. These functional requirements can be your performance, your availability, the capacity of the system, error handling, compatibility part, usability part, your maintainability. Then we have like backup, we have like disaster management, we have documentation, and we can have all those accessibilities added to it. Right? And looking at these lists, these non-functional requirements can be more critical than functional requirements. And even in some cases, if these non-functional requirements or the non-functional attributes are not met, then the possibility might be that the system might be of no use. Right, Internet Explorer is one of the examples. Right. So let's see, we have like non-functional requirements and we have associated metrics. So I've cited this particular task, this particular topic, and you can find some more details in this particular section. Is the first reference that you will have some more details on it. So these are like on one end we have like properties, on the other side I have like the associated metrics. So what we have is like we have performance, and for this performance can have like the number of processed transactions per second can be one metric, and response time to process the input can be another metric. Right? We'll also see into details about this performance measurement and estimations, all those parts. Then we have reliability, right? So this is something which is like rate of occurrence of failures. And then we have like mean time to failure. Next thing is your availability. So it is like probability of failure on demand. That is the simplest one, simplest associated metric. And in fact, you can say size is one of the simplest metrics, right? In bytes or kilobytes, this can be measured. Then we have another very important non-functional attribute, which is your usability. And we have like two options, like time to start to learn 80% of the facility. That can be one measure. Number of errors made by users in a given period of time. So that can be another one. For me, like first one looks pretty simple to measure, pretty simple to specify. Then we have like robustness. So it's like time to restart after the system fails. Right. Time to restart after a system fails. And the last one to this list is, see, we can have some more as well, but in this particular portion, we are restricting our discussion to these only. So we can have portability, that means the number of target systems on which my application would be up and running. See, portability is also something very crucial. That means for n number of platforms, or maybe for maximum possible platforms, my product is readily available for use. That will be the extent of portability, and obviously it is required. We have like n number of platforms, we have like n number of users. So for that sake, it's better to have high portability, highly portable application. Now, the next one is your NFR's classification. Right. So I have explained this particular portion with the help of a case study as well in the next few slides. So that would help you in understanding this particular topic. So these NFRs are classified into your product requirements, your organizational requirements, or your external requirements. In case of your product requirements, these are some requirements which specify that your delivered product must behave in a particular way. So behave means like I can talk about execution speed, I can talk about reliability. Whereas in case of organizational requirements, these requirements are basically due to the consequence of some of the policies of the organization, some of the procedures of your organization. For example, I can have like some process standards which can be used, some implementation requirements, as let's say a company says that okay, I'll only come up with CMM level 5 products, right, or CMM level 4 products. So it's like policy, organizational requirements. Then we have like external requirements. So these are the requirements which arise from factors which are external to the system and its development process as well. For example, your interoperability requirements, your ethical requirements. So now let's take a case study, and before that, let's quickly see the major classification. Right from your non-functional requirements, which is like at the top level, what we have is the next one is your product requirements, organizational requirements, and external requirements. Under the product, we have like usability, efficiency, reliability, and portability. Under efficiency, I have like performance and space. In case of organizational, I have like delivery requirements, implementation requirements, and the standards requirements. For external requirements, I have like interoperability, your ethical requirements, and your legislative requirements. For legislative requirements, we have like privacy and your safety. So this diagram also I took from the same reference, which is your this number 1. Now let's take one case study, which is your MGT system. What do you mean by MGT system? What is this MGT system? No, basically MGT stands for marking, grading, transcript generation system. So let's take this thing. We have like MGT system that is providing a single interface to a number of databases, such as your student record, your subject record, your faculty record, and user can search for student, faculty, and subject records, and your marks grades can be checked. We have like mark sheets and transcripts which can be now. Let's talk about the examples of functional requirements first. Right. Initially, we'll talk about functional. Then we'll talk about product, organization, and external. So the user shall be able to search all the faculty of his department. User can read grades but cannot edit it. Faculties can edit marks or grades for the self-floated subjects only. Then every user shall be given a unique identifier and password which the user shall be able to use for logging in the MGT system. And there will be a different data access authority. Let's take the example of non-functional requirements in this. So what we have is we have like product requirements. So the user interface for MGT shall be implemented as simple HTML without frames or Java applets. Your organizational requirements will be like the system development process, and the deliverable documents shall conform to the process and deliverables defined in this IEEE XYZ standard. Your external requirements example can be like the system shall not disclose any personal information about users apart from their name and ID number to the outside users. So this can be one of the examples. Now, another point to ponder is like the software development project is driven by mainly the following factors. One is your schedule. Another one is your within budget. Then we have like with all major functionalities. That means I'm addressing functional requirements and to meet performance. So that means we're dealing with non-functional requirements. The software project development will be dealing with FRs and NFRs only. So now let's talk about requirements imprecision. So basically, problems arise when requirements are not precisely stated. That's something which is a very important point, that if I'm unable to express myself that what I am looking from this particular product, then there is a problem. On top of it, I can have like ambiguous requirements that can be interpreted in different ways by developers and users. So that's something which is also a major cause of concern. Then we have like the completeness and consistency of the requirements. So in principle, requirements should be both complete and consistent. With complete, I wanted to say that it should include descriptions of all the facilities required. In case of consistent, like there should be no conflicts or the contradiction in the descriptions of the system facilities. But another point to ponder is that in practice, it is impossible to produce a complete and consistent requirements document. See, to the extent possible, whatever steps you're going to take, obviously, definitely, you're keeping in mind to keep the things complete and consistent, but still, there will be like 1 or 2 points will be missing. Now, there is like a situation you identify or where you will get confused that whether to keep some of the functional attributes or maybe some of the attributes under functional attribute or non-functional attribute. So one of the examples is like security. So security is like dealing with the, if suppose I'm saying protecting a system from unauthorized user is definitely a non-functional requirement. But if I'm saying that system can be accessed only by a set of well-defined users with valid username and password, then definitely I am talking about your functional requirements. So from this discussion, we can say that in some of the attributes or the quality attributes, it depends on the way we are specifying, the way we are defining it. So it's like falling under both the umbrellas, your functional requirements and your non-functional requirements. Now, the next part is your behaviors and correctness. So for this, I have kept a blank slide. The reason being, I would like to get the answers from this, you people. Right? When I'm talking about a software product, I'm talking about requirements, the quality requirements, the functional attributes, the non-functional. What do you mean by behaviors and correctness? Any answer? No? So basically, we are dealing with the correctness of the application and how this particular product behaves, right? This particular discussion we had few slides back. So here what we are trying to say is that how it is behaving and whether it is giving the correct solution or not. Now next one is your verification and validation. This topic I've already studied in detail in our software engineering. So let me quickly throw some light on it. So basically, when we are talking about verification, so it is like answering to the question that are we building the product right? And in case of validation, it is like are we building the right product? So it's basically verification is probably process. Validation is something which is verification is basically the process of evaluating a system or component to determine whether the products of a given phase satisfy the conditions imposed at the start of that phase. For example, your requirements review, your design review, and your code review. Whereas in case of validation is the process of evaluating a system or component during or at the end of the development process to determine whether it specifies these or it satisfies the specified requirements or not. So some of the examples can be like unit test to verify the code logic, integration test to verify design, system test to verify that requirements are met or not. So in case of verification and validation, what we are trying to do is these things involve your software quality assurance, your software quality configuration management, software testing strategies, and your software testing methods. Now, next is your testing and debugging. So there is a minor difference between testing and debugging. So basically, testing is done by the team of testers, whereas debugging can be done at the developers end. Right, the same thing which you do in your C programming lab or data structures lab, so that you do the debugging part. In case of testing, the aim is to find and locate the defects. In case of debugging, the aim is to fix those defects. In case of testing, the testers will be generating the test reports, whereas in case of debugging, developers work on those test reports. So these are the minor differences. And in our throughout this post discussion, we'll use the simple term, which is testing. Now, the last part of today's discussion is like testing and verification. Right. So the aim of testing is to uncover the errors in the program, whereas verification aims at providing the correctness of program, showing that it contains no errors. So testing gives that a given program is reliable or not. In case of verifying, as we said, that we are verifying it that it has no errors. So program verification and the testing are something which are complementary. These are some of the references which I used for coming up with this slide and this discussion. Now, let's take some questions for today's class. Yeah, any doubts up till now? Let's take some questions now. Anyone having any doubt? I hope you guys are with me. Okay, okay, Shyam. Okay, fine, fine. That means we are good for today. Then we'll meet on Thursday. See you then. Bye bye.